Yes.
Start?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Start?
Yeah, Pankaj,
Yeah, I need
please
to
start. Mhm.
wait. I need to switch it off, otherwise it will make noise. Good evening, friends. I am Dr. Pankaj Kumar from IUSC New Delhi, along with my INYAS colleague, Dr. Pooja from CSIO, Chandigarh. Welcome all the viewers, including the students, in the webinar series Vigyan Setu, being jointly organized by INSA and INYAS. The aim of this series is to disseminate the information related to science and address the scientific quest of students, researchers, and common people. Today, we have with us Professor Anurag Agrawal as our speaker. He will talk about analog and digital health in the aftermath of COVID-19. As per our format, we will start the webinar with a brief discussion on the topic by our speaker for about 30 minutes. Meanwhile, we request our viewers to post their queries, questions through YouTube chat box. We will try our best to put them to our speaker within a given time frame. I now request Professor Chandrima Saha, President INSA, for the opening remarks and to introduce the audience about the speaker. Professor Saha, please.
A warm welcome to all of you at the INSA-INYAS Vigyan Setu webinar. And we are delighted to have today with us Dr. Anurag Agrawal, Director of Institute of Genomics and Integrative Biology. We are going through extraordinary times, and society is looking at scientists for answers. We need constant communication with the public and need to communicate evidence-based information to them. So the idea of having these webinars was germinated because of these reasons. And one of the goals that national academies are supposed to have is to communicate to the public. And that is why we started this webinar series, and we are engaging scientists, science administrators, doctors to address issues arriving out of this unprecedented situation. I would like to request the audience to participate actively in these events, and so that we have a sort of a dialogue. And at this moment, I would also like to thank the INIAS colleagues for taking this effort, investing their time, and bringing this on, helping INSA to do this. And now I would like to read Dr. Anurag Agarwal is a very accomplished person, but I would read a very brief biography of him. He is a physician scientist and is the director, as I said, of the Institute of Genomics and Integrative Biology, which is a CSIR institution. Known for his studies on lung diseases, Dr. Anurag Agarwal received the Lady Tata Memorial Award in 2010. And in the same year, he received the Swarna Jayanti Fellowship of the Department of Science and Technology. He was awarded the Shanti Swarab Bhatnagar Award of the CSIR, one of the highest science awards in India in 2014. A year later, he received the National Bioscience Career Development Award for the year 2015, and he is also recipient of the prestigious Senior Fellowship of the Wellcome Trust DBT India Alliance. Dr. Agarwal is also an outstanding professor of Academy of Scientific and Innovative Research in India, and he is a fellow of the Indian National Science Academy and the Indian Academy of Sciences. And again, it is a delight to have him with us. And he is also a very good communicator of scientific issues. So this is, having said the very brief biodata of him, I invite him to talk to us in the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chandrima. That was kind. And thank you to both INSA and INYAS for organizing it. And thanks to any of the viewers for making time to talk about this important topic. Let me get my slides on board. Here we go. And Pankaj, are the slides visible?
Yes,
Yeah.
they are. Yes.
Okay.
So we will switch off on our camera and you can continue, sir.
Sure. Thank you very much. So the topic I chose to speak about today was on analog and digital health in the aftermath of COVID-19. Now, this is something that is important because the world has changed a lot. If I had to say, how is health doing in the digital world? I would say we are laggards. Today, if you showed a person a film and a film camera, they might look at you and say, what is this? In many fields, especially finance, banking, economics, digital has already taken over. Commerce digital has taken over. But health has been a bit slow in terms of keeping pace with recent developments. So what we have seen in the last few months, last few years, is there's been a push, everybody talking about digital health. But now in the time of COVID-19, we have seen some major movements. So what is this new enabler for analog to digital in the post-COVID world? We've been talking about digital health for a very long time. The true enablers are three words: digitization, digitalization, and digital transformation. It's of life, not just health. And these three words are often misunderstood. Many people use them in ways which are similar to each other. But let me give an example. Most of you listening today are probably from the science background. If you are doing your experiments the old way, and in the end you scan your data and you keep a copy in your old registers, you have only digitized. Health is like that. Many places we talk about digitization of health, we are saying do things the old way, just scan some copies and make them uploadable anywhere. The next level, perhaps from your labs, is digitalization. Your microscopy, your booking equipment might all be electronic. You may not generate any paper in the course of your experiment, and all this data might be going directly to your electronic notebooks. In that sense, you can say we have digitalized. But the last step, digital transformation, is really not about your work. It's about your work in the context of all possible ecosystems around you. It's about your institution. It's about society. It's about everybody being digitalized in such a way that you harmoniously work all across. And that is critical when you start imagining things like this. So this figure has been on the website of the Healthier World of Johns Hopkins Medical Institute for at least a few years now. What you see is a concept of this. People have smartphones, people have health centers, people are undergoing next generation testings like diagnostics and GS, but everything is disconnected from each other. This could be a digitized or a digitalized world, but because you cannot go here and receive the tests from here, and your phone cannot receive when your test gets done, it is still a system that is inefficient. And information does not flow freely across the entire system. On the other hand, the vision of a digital ecosystem with a digital transformation is here. Everything is connected and interoperable with each other. Now, you can all imagine that this is very difficult to accomplish. It cannot be accomplished by only the health people talking about digitization or digitalization. It has to permeate every part of society. Which is why even last year, if you asked me, I would have said digital transformation is years away. Perhaps in Europe in 5 years, perhaps in India in 10 years. And I would say I don't actually see it coming in the next 2 to 3 years. But you can see that big wrecking ball, COVID-19. And COVID-19 has changed the way we look at things. It's the way in which we want to interact with people face to face. And by fear alone, I think COVID-19 has brought many changes, some welcome, some perhaps not so welcome, for the field of digital health. But let me point out here before I go any further, digital is not necessarily better than analog. In fact, if you met a professional photographer in early 2000s, they would still be using their film-based cameras. They would be using the film-based cameras because the resolution of digital was not good enough. In fact, analog is always more fine as a complete signal compared to digital. It's only when the resolution of your analog becomes finer than the resolution of the human brain does it not start mattering anymore. And these are the kind of things that we need to keep about. So I'm not trying to imply at any point over here that digital is necessarily superior to analog, just pointing out a transition. So let's start with an example that's very familiar, at least to me as a lung doctor, the stethoscope. On this picture of the table over here, you can see a variety of types. These are the most ancient stethoscopes. These things like horns pointing at the top are little later versions. You can see the type that you perhaps saw me on my photograph hanging around my neck. Not sure why I had it on that day. And over here, you can see that white thing connected to a tablet. That's called a point of care ultrasound. Let's talk about that a bit. On the top left, there is a picture of a doctor listening to the lungs of a patient. You can see he's really up and close, his ear right up to the chest. In his hand, he's holding a tube. He could use the tube to, be a little bit further away, but that would not take him very far away. And that doctor, if you can imagine if that patient had COVID, is at very high risk. Now, this kind of proximity would not be taken away. For example, even if you digitized your stethoscope. So the lower picture show new generation stethoscopes with a digitization component. You're still hearing sound, you are just digitizing it. You can even have stethoscopes which don't even have a hearing piece. A nurse could hold it to the chest of the patient, the sound could be transferred far away, and somebody could hear from far away from the patient without putting themselves at risk. And this becomes areas like telemedicine that we will talk about in a minute. But when you undergo transformation, you don't just digitize or digitalize, you reinvent the entire ecosystem. Why do you want to hear the sounds of the lung? You want to hear the sounds of the lung because you want to know what's happening to the lungs. Now, sounds are one way of doing it, but you could also feed an ultrasound into the lungs to find out what's happening into the lung. That is called POCUS, point of care ultrasound. I mean, it sounds a bit like hocus pocus, but this is real. This is very much active. These are things that are changing, and this is a picture of a COVID lung right below. You can see these streaky lines marked by arrows coming down. And these streaky lines indicate this person has a type of interstitial changes, positive in COVID. Now imagine what this does. If you wanted to image that patient's lung under the normal condition, you would send him from this bed all the way down to the X-ray machine or the CT scanner. Somebody would have to accompany him. The person would be sick in case they are coughing. They cannot actually stop coughing. There would be decontamination, everything else. But using high-end digital point of care technologies connected to intranets, within minutes, you can go to the bedside of a COVID patient, put your probe right up to his chest, and the person wearing PPE could do that for multiple patients. And automatically, this could be seen by either a human being or an artificial intelligence system. And immediately you would know the person is showing lung disease signs of COVID or not. So why does this technology not come routinely? Why is it that we are talking about all these things only in the time of COVID-19? So here is an oversimplified model of digital health adoption coming from a blog called Health Advances. The first step of any new technology is technical validation. This takes some time. After technical validation, you go to real clinical scenarios, you generate evidence. From there, you move to regulatory clearance. From there, you move to population awareness and credibility. From there, you move to commercial models effective enough for the technology to be taken up. Now, which of these does COVID change? Let's talk about step number one. Would you still need to technically validate? Of course. Nothing can reach the market without some degree of technical validation. Step number 2 is evidence. Now, if you're looking for evidence, perhaps in an accelerated urgent mode, you might say, let's do this fast. The next step would be regulatory clearance. All of you have heard about emergency clearance being given by FDA, EU, ICMR, DCGI. So this part becomes faster. But the very important parts are 4 and 5. Today, everybody is listening to social media, electronic media, trying to learn what the latest tech is. And there's so many people willing to uptake such new technologies if it promises to be useful for COVID-19, that commercial models are coming very fast. So the analog to digital transition is being driven by every one of these steps, being influenced in some way or the other. Even the technical validation part, the commitment, the number of hours that people are working to get it done have clearly gone up. So to paraphrase the old song, what's love got to do with it? Let's ask the question of what's COVID got to do with it? Now, the way I see it, it's a simple energy hump, a diagram very familiar to all of you. For adoption of any technology, even if the chemistry is favorable, there's an initial activation energy. Most things in translation die in the valley of death because they can't find that extra push to cross this hump. What COVID has been, it's been like a catalyst for change, for better or worse, we'll discuss later. But it's made the hump much, much smaller. Sometimes I worry, perhaps it's pulling in the wrong direction, but by and large, things that got used to stuck over here are now crossing through. And let's see what types of things are happening. You can see that virtual visits are happening. We have technical validation, we have evidence. It doesn't require regulatory clearance. Pretty much the telemedicine guidelines of India had been stuck for ages. 2 years ago, people had asked the question, the High Court of Bombay had asked the question, is telemedicine even valid? And the answer was pending. This year, finally, after the lockdown was announced, in the last week of March, the government announced the telemedicine regulatory guidelines. Awareness and credibility has been there. Commercialization effect is there. Symptom checkers, starting from Arogya Setu to every possible symptom checker, you can see them on the market. Remote patient monitoring. Apart from commercial platforms, which really haven't come yet, you can see plenty of them. Digital disease management is a very interesting one. Using commercial providers, it has become a commercial business-to-business tool more than a public tool. And digital pharmacies, I'm sure many of you have heard of in the time to come. And all this is not, something happening in the West or in China or the global North. These are all things we have seen happening within months at a large scale in India. And I would actually say it's not that India was behind. We had multiple such digital health ancillary systems already in place. It's just that the traction was small. The lockdown, I think, forced a lot of this to come to real time. If you really want to see how big data, digital health, and AI was used in a very, very concerted way by the government for something critical, you have to look at China. For better or worse, China, because of its political system, can implement things perhaps faster than anybody else. I will put a caveat to that. Without an authoritarian system, South Korea also did very, very well in terms of implementing things very fast. So did Singapore. But what you saw in China during the time of lockdown, every possible digital health tool came. From thermal scanning in the streets, identifying the people from their faces, figuring out who might be infected, who is living where, apps telling people which blocks, which places are infected, who has been in contact with whom, entire mental health services, digital consultations, everything was online. If you were infected, your food was delivered, drones were in place. When they could not find enough nucleic acid testing, they used mass CT scanning. I'll show you pictures later on. They used CT scanning to make diagnosis. They didn't have enough radiologists to read all those CT scans they were doing. They used AI algorithms to read those CT scans. They started doing mass viral genome-based testing. They used automatic reading platforms to quickly define positives, send out messages, tell people where to show up. Once the people signed up, even the Uber would show up connected to their app in front of their house, and they were supposed to go to a center that was already decided. Now, this degree of control may or may not be good for the social architectures, but it showed the power of digital health tools in containing a deadly epidemic. So what's the healthcare impact in coming years? I really like this cover on the left. I don't know how many of you have heard about this. And I don't know the average age of the audience. So I don't know if I was to say, To Serve with Love is a very famous book. How many of you would have read it? But Braithwaite wrote a wonderful book about To Serve with Love, in which a teacher finds a very difficult to teach class and communicates his enthusiasm for learning to that very difficult class. This book by Judith Newman, called To Siri with Love, talks about the battle of her and her autistic son in trying to get learning. So it turned out people had great difficulty communicating with her son because of his autism. But he found a non-judgmental person, well, machine, Siri, to which it could talk forever. Every possible question the boy would ask, Siri would answer. It would not get pained. It would not, get into an argument. It would simply answer every question that it could from what the child was answering. Turned out in this book that this interaction with Siri, with a human-like voice, was very important for the development of the child. And the book kind of discusses even how the child proposed to Siri and wanted to marry Siri. But anyway, that's a different question for a different day. But you can see entire new paradigms of care are starting now in medicine. Let's talk about the basic one. The basic one is face-to-face care. The patient walks in, meets the doctor, both see each other in person. They have an interaction. Human beings are analog. You have an analog-analog interaction. The basic extension of that is telemedicine. You are still seeing your doctor, but some kind of digital technology is enabling you to meet even though you are in different rooms. Nothing very surprising about that. Then come medical chatbots. I will show you one example later on. In this, the person on the other end is digital. The human being remains on one end. And that's pretty common now. In fact, I would say there are lots of medical chatbots already. You will see very, very fine quality chatbots in the next 1 year or so. The next level, which people aren't aware of, but it is definitely going to come within the next 5 years, is of a digital twin under constant surveillance. Now imagine that you are being monitored because of all your personable devices. It could be your watch measuring a few things about you right now. It could be cameras, it could be vests, it could be clothes, it could be anything. Now that system with your health information continuously generating data is forming a digital twin for you. Now how rich the digital twin is depends upon how rich the data is. In theory, there is nothing stopping creating a digital twin that even contains your genome sequence in it. Now this digital data that is continuously being collected about you, you're not even aware of it. It's real, it exists, it reflects your body, but your digital twin can undergo algorithms that can put it under continuous health surveillance. And in this digital interaction, your digital twin being acted upon by digital algorithms, if they find something meaningful that you in the real world need to be aware of, it can be done. Now imagine this in the time of COVID. Imagine you have nursing homes with high-risk elderly patients who are capable of spreading the infection. Imagine thermal scanners everywhere. Imagine their personal details everywhere. Imagine their contact networks everywhere. In a complete digital interaction world, you could find out who is likely to have it. You could even have orders go out regarding what is to be done, and humans would be implementing the orders of the digital interaction. And I would actually tell you, this is not fantasy fiction. Some elements of what I'm saying have already happened. The second part, not necessarily linked to COVID, but partly, is how can all this help address the common problems in healthcare? Now, if you were to ask a patient, what bothers you about healthcare? Their typical answers would be, my doctor is never available, more so now than ever. My doctor keeps me waiting. And here's the latest problem. I found this on Google. My doctor has no idea. I don't know where they went to medical school. And the last part, which is unfortunate, I finally found a good doctor after all this time, but they moved away, passed away. You know, doctors are human beings. So Eric Topol, a very famous cardiologist, who is now a digital health evangelist, wrote this very important book, The Patient Will See You Now, talking about how digital health will be empowering patients and giving them control over their own health. Let's see how far that is true. The simplest technology, of course, is telemedicine. Radiology is probably the easiest one amongst it. Practice of medicine over a distance. If you're virtually, you are digital, like, scanners generate digital images. You can go all over the world and you can transfer the scan straight from the scanner to the machine. And this picture of a CT scan actually shows a massive stroke. A person could come in the middle of a night to a hospital without a radiologist, and across the world in India, covering for this US hospital on the left, you could discover the person has a stroke within 5 minutes of coming into the scanner. We don't exactly have this right now in all over healthcare, but some of you may have heard of Arogya Setu. Fewer ones amongst you might be aware, there's another app called Arogya Setu Mitra. The motto of Arogya Setu Mitra is we step in so you do not have to step out. You can do online consultations. They are both government and private providers. Everything is free for the time being during COVID. You can get home lab tests done. You can get online medicines ordered directly to your house. Everything can be done online without going to physically see a doctor. This would not have occurred apps without the threat of COVID. The ability for an app to integrate end-to-end from lab testing to online medicines to consultations, it's not fully integrated yet. The prescription does not pass from your consultation directly into the pharmacy. They are working on it. We are regularly in touch with the team to see what else can be done. More and more people are joining this platform. There is a company called Swasth, which is actually a coalition of multiple mega partners that is building an entire platform on something called the India Stack. I'll talk about it to you later. But this is, leveraging the fact that a large part of India, large does not mean all, has actually built digital roots. And that's something very critical we'll come back to later. This is an app that the NHS uses. NHS is in the UK. You can enter your symptoms into this program called EDA, and EDA can tell you what you are likely to have. It's built upon a very strong medical reasoning engine, amongst the best in the world. And I have tried it a few times. It's actually pretty good. You all can download and try it sometimes, and you will be surprised to see how good this chatbot is. And no wonder, the reviews are excellent. It doesn't necessarily tell you have one disease. It may tell you have 50% probability of this, 10% probability of this. But even if a doctor tells you a higher probability, reality is that we don't actually know more than 70, 80%. But we know that patients don't like to be confused. We know that patients don't want to be told a cafeteria list of choices. They simply want to be told, I think you have that, please do this. That's a paternalistic style of medicine, more common in India. In the West, it is not uncommon for physicians and patients to have a discussion regarding 4 or 5 possibilities. Now this ADA and many other things I talked about are driven by some form of AI. ADA is actually more of a declarative AI, not the types that we do for classifying CTs. But I would like to tell you right now, while we will talk a bit about AI in the next few slides, it is not a new topic. You can trace it all the way back to the 1950s when John McCarthy joined MIT. In fact, John McCarthy, when he went to MIT and created the word AI, he was thinking of something very different from what we call AI. From his point of view, every elevator was intelligent. What was a prevailing view was cybernetics, pattern recognition. But AI is a much cooler word than cybernetics, more understandable to the layperson. And all the work of CNN that we talk about, everybody and their uncle is doing convolutional neural networks now. This is PhD work of Yan LeCun in 1988. So nothing that new about it. It's been around for a while. The compute, the digital ecosystem is more recent. In fact, if you look at this paper from NEJM, the New England Journal of Medicine, if there is a Bible for medicine, I guess this is it. Lancet would claim to be a close second, but they are in a bit of a shadow right now. But then NEJM also has done the retraction. Anyway, I'm digressing. If you look at this paper from 1970, it talks about medicine and the computer, the promise and the problems of change. And they talk about this. Look at this last line. Computing science will probably exert its major efforts by augmenting and in some cases largely replacing the intellectual functions of the physician. These things were talked about in the 1970s. They haven't happened in the last 50 years. They're being talked about again today, but today is a bit different. The power of today's compute is significantly greater than it used to be. The amount of data that now exists is significantly more than it used to be. And this is just an example of what all a computer was able to do by a program written by a doctor, analyze things even then, with actual text and conversations happening with doctors. So when you see all this, we should not think this is something very new. That the common public has access to things like this is very new. For high-end computer labs, these things have been there for 50 years. And this, of course, is a picture that many of you are familiar with. This is Garry Kasparov and Deep Blue, the brain's last stand. That was not really quite AI. All that machine could do was play chess. There is a subsequent work on a game called Go, far more complicated in terms of possibilities compared to chess. And when the computer beat the world's second best player in Go, it became the front cover of Nature. What was really amazing was within a year after that, a version of the program called AlphaZero, previous program was called AlphaGo, was given nothing except the rules of the game, just the rules of the game. It never played with a human being, only played with itself. And 4 hours after training itself, it beat the top chess program in the world that grandmasters cannot beat. And it beat it 64-36-0. In the world of chess, that's almost impossible. So that's where we have reached with computations, and that is unique. It's come even to things like protein folding, science applications. There is a competition in which amino acid sequences are given, where structures have already been found. And these amino acid sequences, people have to predict the structures. And that leads to, basically a competition in which you find who's the best team. So AlphaGo, that was previously making games, now create an algorithm called AlphaFold for protein folding. In 43 out of 90 tests, where only amino acid sequence was known, the AlphaFold algorithm won 25. The next best team won 3. This was a new algorithm, pure machine learning, competing against the best structural biologists in the world. And it beat them 25 out of 43, it came first. The average difference actually wasn't that much, but winning 25 times out of 40, with the next best team winning 3, tells you the balance of power has shifted in this world. So in the next 100 years of medicine, we already knew that very soon the formulas that the machine uses will get to a point that language can no longer summarize them, which basically means physicians can no longer truly say they understand them, which basically means that the user cannot possibly expect an explanation from the physician regarding everything that they are being told to do. It's a very interesting direction in the world of digital health. And you can imagine that people will resist it. Physicians would resist a system that even if it works, they don't understand. Even patients might say, look, if you don't know how it works, how can I have trust on this? But fear is a driver. If people were to know this medication might work to prevent me from dying of COVID, nobody has any idea how it works. I have got COVID. I have got tremendous fear. Should I try it? So lots of things will happen, and not everything would be desirable. And these are the kind of things we need to worry about in terms of how we should handle these new trends, where understanding of what the computers are spitting out is no longer possible. But this is the future of medicine. So for all practical purposes, when we talk about artificial intelligence, it is machine learning. It can briefly be of 4 types. It can be supervised. You give the computer 2 classes that you have told them, this class is A, this class is B. the computer learns how to differentiate A from B. This could be, for example, diabetic retinopathy. It could be age. It could be gender. And it's amazing. So the photographs on the right, you can see the computer is predicting the gender of a person from a photograph of the retina. Humans cannot do it. None of my ophthalmologist friend can tell after looking into the eyes of a person whether the person is male or female. I mean, they can certainly do it before they start looking into the eyes, but they can't do it before. The classification can tell from the eye whether the person is a smoker or a non-smoker. It can tell their age, plus minus 3 years. None of these things are possible for the human doctor. We don't exactly know how it works, but it works. Then comes unsupervised learning. Here you don't know A and B, but you feel that my data contains two types of people. It's a mixture. I don't think there's a homogeneous set. Can the computer tell me what might be those two types of people? This can almost aid scientific discovery. Then comes semi-supervised, which is a combination of both. And the last is called reinforcement learning, when there is a action that somebody is taking, and then there is a consequence, and then there is another action, then there is another consequence. And you try to figure out what is the best action to take to keep somebody alive. This could be something as simple as adjusting the medication of a patient in an ICU. So this requires temporal data with an action, a policy, and an outcome. So are these kinds of things being done in India? Yes, they are. For example, AI solution for chest X-rays in COVID. There's a group of people together, multiple CSI labs, private labs. You can see the X-ray of this X-ray. You can see this reddish thing on the chest X-ray being identified as an abnormal COVID. It's very subtle, actually. It wasn't easy. You can see CT scan data. If you can't do an RT-PCR, it's coming 7 days to come positive. China uses extensively. Automatically, you can see these heat maps, these red areas. The abnormal CT scan, that white area at the base of the lung in the middle, is being picked up as red over here. So you can even use them to follow a patient. There's 3 different CT scans of a patient, and you're trying to ask, is the patient getting better? The AI digital health systems are automatically taking these images almost from the scanner and figuring out how much of the lung is involved, and then plotting as the lung is getting better. You can see by the 3rd CT on the extreme right, the lung is back to normal again. You can take decisions to discharge a patient. You can take decisions to admit a patient based on these things. Last year, well, actually this year was published, but the work is from last year. We heard about the first antibiotic discovered by AI. This was a brand new class of antibiotic never seen before. It's called helicin. For those of you who like science fiction, it's about the novel Odyssey, the computer called HAL. Many of you might remember how that one goes. So this antibiotic is called helicin, named after HAL, the AI system in Odyssey. So the way I've given this talk so far, it's like, every piece of the puzzle has fit together. Everything is perfect, but I don't mean to convey to you that everything is good. In reality, digital is not a solution by itself. It's just a bridge to solving real problems. Problems are usually analog, people are analog, and there's a beautiful book I would encourage many of you to read. It's called The Digital Nation by N. Chandrasekaran, who is basically the head of Tata Sons, and Rupa Purushottam, who imagined in 2050, the BRICS country with India would be leading members of the global economy back in the early 2000s. I can just give you one example. We were trying to do a survey in a district called Kolar to figure out how many people might be infected. Now, if we do this the usual way without digital, it'll take a month for us to do all the testing, collate all the data. Now, who really would care about the results if it took us 1 month to do this? Same way if you do a digital platform in which you have subject data capture, identification, randomization, all data coming onto a digital platform, immediately available for analysis, immediately available to decision makers, then it becomes easier. And there we use Tata's digital platforms to do this. The second important part is that, perhaps in God, some of us trust. everybody else must bring data. And digital health by itself does not mean there is a substantial amount of data that you can trust. It may be built on pockets of data that may not reflect the real life. And how those data were collected does not necessarily mean they were ethical. Respect for human autonomy, privacy, ethics is fundamental to healthcare. None of these issues are algorithm issues. So you can never think of digital health independent of ethics and concerns for the human nature. And the other important part is that unbiased collection of biased data does not take care of bias. And last, I will tell you this is a semi-dangerous, semi-humorous story. The activation maps I told you, the red ones where the CT turned red, it tells you where the AI is looking, not what it is seeing. There is a very nice story about pneumothorax. Now, pneumothorax means that a lung has dropped and it's basically air has leaked out of it. Now, it turns out when air leaks out, we put in something called a chest tube. You put a tube inside that person's chest to suck out the air. So because you shoot one X-ray before the person has pneumothorax, and then every day the person in the hospital, you keep shooting more X-rays to see how much air has been sucked out, the majority of pneumothorax X-rays have a chest tube. So an AI was able to reach 90% performance by simply noting the presence of the chest tube to diagnose a pneumothorax. Now that is something that is obviously useless in real life. Because if you already have a chest tube, somebody already knows there is a pneumothorax. There is no point in the AI making the call. Where you need the AI to make a call is in those 10% of the X-rays where there was no chest tube. And because the training set did not think about these issues, the AI looked very successful without actually being successful. So all these little things need to be kept in mind. AI needs to be understandable. And here is one of the last examples I'll give before I move towards the end of my talk. This is basically bias in data is equal to bias in AI. If you feed in data from blacks and whites, and you look at who needs more healthcare based on how much more healthcare they will need, you will bias the system towards those who get healthcare. And that's exactly what happened. The AI tool was referring whites for more care, even though they were less sick than the blacks, because the data it was using showed that the whites were getting more care in the future. So it was trained to recognize them earlier without any natural race bias. It was in the data itself. Beautiful science paper in 2019. That's why we now have a commission looking at governing health futures in 2030. The meeting of that will now be virtual. It was supposed to be at IGIB on the 9th and 10th of June with 20 commissioners from around the world. Now we will all meet only virtually. India is actually in a good shape. We have Aadhaar, mobile platforms, India Stacks, payment platforms. If on top of the digital foundation of India, we were to build health registries, we were to build all tools on top of it, make them interoperable, we would have a true second mover advantage. So what should bring analog to digital transformation anywhere in the world? First, you should have digital foundations. If you haven't built the foundations, don't try to superimpose the digital transformation. You cannot do it. You'll only achieve digitization or digitalization. You should always be looking at real problems that need to be solved, not for the sake of it. Then you should be looking for value and efficiency. You should be having safeguards. You should have an assurance of inclusivity. You should not be driving this transformation by fear alone. So in the end, I will simply say, COVID-19 will change healthcare forever. It might be for better or worse. Somehow I feel that when people ask, who led the digital transformation for companies? The answer will not be the CEOs. It will not be the CTOs. The answer will be COVID-19. So we have momentum behind us. If we want to bring this transition, we should do it. But we should keep all those things I talked about in my previous slide in mind. We should build the correct ecosystem for this transformation. Thank you all very much. That's all I have to say. I'll be happy to take questions.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Agrawal. In fact, your last point, the COVID-19 will bring digital transformation.
Pankaj, you are not audible to us.
Pankaj, your voice is not coming clearly to me.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you very well
Okay.
now.
So I was just mentioning that your last slide where you say that the COVID-19 will bring the digital transformation. That was really, really good. Thank you very much for your very valuable insights on the topic. I'm sure our viewer have enjoyed your views and knowledge you have imparted to all of us. And now we will take questions from viewers, and we will try our level best to pick up maximum questions allowed in the available time frame. So, Dr. Agrawal, the first question is, for wet lab science, how much
Yes.
can be replaced by AI-based technologies, at least with respect to the post-COVID science?
Now, if you think about wet lab science, now the experiments start with a hypothesis, right? Today, the hypothesis comes because you have a specific thought in mind. Now, tomorrow, if the hypotheses you test are pre-screened by an AI, for example, in drug discovery, it could certainly accelerate the way you went through your hypothesis. So, for example, in the world of drug discovery, the number of wet lab experiments you would do could be cut down by 90% based on AI type driven prioritization in silico. You could argue a lot of computational biology you're doing is already a form of AI. See, AI does not have to be CNNs. Declarative AI, rule-based AI is also AI. So certainly it could accelerate that part. The second part is the downstream. The number of things you take up for wet lab testing is one. Second, the data that comes out of wet lab is also very, very open towards use of AI to interpret. So I would say that's important as well. So both in what you take up and both in what you conclude and infer, AI is important.
Right. Thank you. Pooja?
Rightly said, sir. So I am sure the way this COVID-19 has transformed the healthcare system, it would have a long-lasting impact. So there comes a question about the economical feasibility, like how economically strong enough we are to support fully AI-based science, specifically in our country.
So one assumption in that question is that AI will be more expensive. And that's a very important question. Now, if you look at, well, I showed you the slide, but I didn't discuss it in detail. If you saw the India stack, what does India stack mean? India stack is the digital infrastructure of India, and that has been created as a public good. So the investment in the India stack has been made almost exclusively by the government of India, and India stack is being made freely available to companies and other institutions. Now, this was the most critical element towards what you are asking of affordable AI-based solutions. And critical to that was building digital infrastructure of the country as a public good. And that has been done. And even the tools of interoperability on the India stack towards what will be called the health stack are being made freely. So which basically means that APIs will be free, underlying architectures will be free. People only have to build apps to connect to the API to build their entire applications. And that is low cost compared to other things. And that gives me hope. I do not know for certain, nobody does, that in India, at least, we will see significant amount of AI public health tools, which will both be effective and cost effective.
Right. So the next question is that to what extent India is prepared for transition to the digital world in an analog healthcare setup?
So the cities of India and the 400 million smartphone users of India are prepared. India has, in terms of absolute numbers, one of the largest digital base in the world. In percentages, of course, it's not that high. In terms of cheapness of data, India has amongst the cheapest data in the world. In terms of penetration of 3G upwards, in numbers, India has amongst the largest numbers. So number of people benefited and access to digital health is going to be very high in India. The percentage of Indians who can benefit from digital health is obviously not going to be as high as we hope it is. But we see rapidly declining prices, but we also see now in the time of COVID, the economy taking a hit. I am not sure where the combined dynamic of it will go. At one end, digital health will go up. On the other end, the flexible funds available with people to use it might go down. And I think only the government is the necessary player here to make sure it reaches as deep as possible, as wide as possible. If the government does not take charge of it in terms of making it available and accessible, perhaps not at an individual level, but at a kiosk level, it will not happen.
Right.
Sir, now we will take viewer question because there are lots of questions. So we will try to take as much as we can. So first question is from Pushpendra Gupta. What he is asking is, what do you think telemedicine will become common in India? Like when?
Yes, telemedicine has already started becoming common. Absolutely, in theory, even when you take WhatsApp advice, it is some form of telemedicine. So in that sense, WhatsApp medicine has been around in India now for quite a while. There is a bit of a challenge in India, and I'll give you the answer without pulling punches. India is an individual practitioner driven system. An individual practitioner does not want referrals. He or she wants to not send out their cases to somebody else. They want to retain their cases. Now, the foreign models of digital health and telemedicine imagines a number of people working together. If this guy is busy, the next person who's free takes the case. But individual practitioners do not have the incentive to pass the case to anybody else. So until the system of healthcare in India remains driven by individual practitioners as opposed to healthcare organizations, the penetration of telemedicine will remain poor, because it will be better to keep the person waiting. I mean, the point of telemedicine is find the next accessible doctor and transfer the case over there. But if Practo does it and many doctors sign up, they don't want to sign up because they don't want the patient to get an alternative of going to some other doctor. So that's the real challenge, practical challenge. It will come. It will just come slowly. It will come in organization before it comes to individuals.
Yeah. Yeah. So next question. Thank you. So the next question by Srikant Mantri is asking that in India, is there any institute which is conducting GWAS, Genome Wide Association Analysis, to develop models to predict which individual would experience lethal effect if infected?
That's an easy answer. My institute is very happy to try to develop it. We need sufficient cases. And so on one end, I hope we will not have sufficient cases. But if we do, because you would need a large number of people who died of COVID to be able to reach such inferences or develop very severe disease. So while I hope we will not reach the required sample sizes, we are more than ready to do such a stuff.
Right.
Sir, going by next question, you told about the AI in healthcare system, and AI also being used for COVID treatment, COVID cases identification. So in this series, X-ray scan is also being widely used as a diagnostic effort. So what is the efficacy of this technique in comparison to RT-PCR and other lab techniques?
So here are the numbers. The sensitivity of an X-ray is below 50%. The specificity is also below 50%. That of a CT scan, the sensitivity and specificity is much better, closer to the 80s. For RT-PCR, don't trust the original numbers of CT that came from China, which claimed 95 and 99. Those numbers have been proven to be wrong. For RT-PCR, it depends on the day. Around the first 2 days of symptoms, the sensitivity is around 80%. The specificity is 100% nearly. But either before or after, the sensitivity drops down to the range of 40 to 50%, either when you test too early or you test too late, which is why the guidelines say 5 days to 7 days after exposure, when the sensitivity is at its highest, and there is a reason for those guidelines.
Sir, to add into same questions, because I got curious to get to know one more thing in this. What about the sense and smell, which is also a very good, it is being taken to diagnose COVID-19 patients?
Yes. So again, the issue is sensitivity and specificity.
Yeah.
While a large number of people say they had it, not everybody says. So on a quick basis of a survey done at CSIO, I believe,
Yeah.
and
Yes, I
which
was watching.
Vishamjit has done and sent,
Yeah.
I believe that the number will not be anywhere close to 90s or 80s and things like that. So it will be a useful adjunct. It will not be super sensitive or super specific, but it will be useful.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Pankaj, you can take.
Yeah. So next question is that about the kit which is developed by your lab, Feluda.
Yes.
As per media reports, it is heard that Tata Group has taken it up
Correct.
for manufacturing on a large scale, so that we can, to maximize the testing capabilities. What is the status of this kit, and is it being utilized to test for testing purpose? And to add, are we self-reliant on the testing front? Also, how this kit is reliable in comparison to Chinese kit and PCR, RT-PCR method?
Generally speaking, one should not comment on technology with commercial transfer, but I'll answer it anyway. I'm sure Tata's will forgive me. So A, it's a non-exclusive transfer. B, they have already started towards, so they've got permission to start producing the kit. There are a bunch of permissions that are required. But even after you get permission to produce a kit, after that it goes for regulatory validation. Because what we develop in IGIV can never be identical to what Tata's produce from their factories. And therefore, whatever is produced goes all the way back for further validation, which will take time. And the question regarding indigenous components, this is a matter of some degree of sadness that while the CRISPR is Indian, getting high quality components starting anywhere from biotinylated primers is very difficult from within India. I mean, I do not know why we cannot as a nation make even high quality primers or, long RNA probes, but we can't. We have tried multiple providers. So I would not blame only the Chinese. I would say there's a lot of improvement scope in quality control systems. Perhaps, it's because of many things, good quality materials aren't coming from further up and lots of possible problems. In terms of performance against the Chinese kits, I think it's a little difficult question to answer. There is no exact equivalent of a CRISPR kit from China. If you are saying about the poor quality CRISPR, the poor quality other diagnostic kits, which had 40-50% sensitivity and 70-80% specificity, this is much better. It's in the mid to high 90s in our hands. But I would again want to be very, very clear. The product made in lab, tested in our hands on even blinded samples is not the same as a mass manufactured product made by somebody else and shipped out to market. So only when it goes for official ICMR testing of a manufactured product can that question be correctly answered. Because after all, we're not comparing to what those Chinese manufacturers did inside their labs. We are now looking at their product that went into a plane, underwent shipping, maybe went through lots of temperature fluctuations. Who knows?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, Pooja?
Yeah, rightly, sir. But this is one of the very famous Faluda is very famous word in common. We can
Feluda, not Faluda.
Faluda,
North
yeah.
India में बेचारे का फलूदा बन जाता है.
What is that?
Yeah.
My Bengali friends get very, very distressed when they hear Faluda.
Yeah. So even we had a talk by Dr. Souvik on GWAS platform. He told about it in a very interesting way.
Yes.
Yes. So going by the next question, sir, from Janu Matthew, what he's asking about, when you talk about interoperability, how challenging do you think it is to achieve it? Then the fact that most of the health data collected remains unstructured.
So actually, I would say if India has one advantage, if we follow the National Digital Health Blueprint that came out in 2017, if we follow it, if being the operative word here, everything is imagined on the stack. At the base is an ID stack where every citizen of the country is known. Even a non-citizen, Aadhaar is not for citizens alone. On next of it is a universal payment engine, which means all finance and payments can be integrated. On top of it is a health stack. On top of it are APIs. And if all developers simply agree to follow every guideline written in the NHD, then we would have an extremely interoperable system. So we would in fact be far better than America if we do it that way.
Yeah. Dr. Agrawal, there is a question on HCQ. You wrote a letter along with DGCSIR.
Okay.
So WHO once said that, okay, stop it. And then now yesterday night, they say that, okay, you can again start the trial. So why there are flip-flops and how does it work?
Okay, when I say how does it work, I'm giving you a purely personal opinion on the matter. The way it works is then when a very reputable journal publishes a study, there's a tremendous impact on the psyche of people. None of us want to be wrong. If I see a paper in WHO questioning the toxicity of HCQ, and I'm doing a trial on HCQ, I would be very worried that tomorrow if there's toxicity, people will say, look, the Lancet had published that paper, and you still went ahead with the trial. So to protect ourselves, we do what I would call a knee-jerk reaction. It would have been nicer if either the review process had been stricter, right, and you have already seen Lancet has put an expression of concern about it. It would have been nicer if the WHO could have quickly looked at its own data before stopping the trial. But at the end of the day, it didn't do it. But this is the scientific process. Yeah. These things happen. They put out a questionable paper. We raised questions. They answered the questions. They put out an expression of concern. Now everything is back to where it should be. Yes, some delay happened, but that's how science grows. That's the beauty of science. Yeah, we permit questioning. So I think of all this as a success story, actually. Right.
Yeah. So there comes one more question related to AI for COVID-19. The question is by Ved Kamboj, where he is asking, can AI predict which case is going to get protective antibodies against COVID-19?
And how AI can predict almost anything that is predictable from the data given, and given sufficient number of labeled classes to do it. It is usually better in pattern recognition than humans. The real question then is there any doubt on this question? So pretty much if you're talking about general antibodies, almost everybody who is infected at some point or another, short of the immunocompromised ones, develop antibodies. Now the next question is the day on which they develop the antibodies. Now here comes your first noise. Do you have an equal measurement system capable of reliably detecting the antibody levels in all people for whom the data comes? If you don't, there is garbage in the data. And that's the trouble with all statistics. At the end of the day, AI is not any more than a different type of statistics. Garbage in, garbage out. So when you give it very, very high quality data from a single platform with a single way of measurement, it'll tell you on that platform on which day the antibody will come positive, and none of those conclusions would have any meaning for any other platform or any other type of people. So that's true for most things in life. Right. Sir. True insight, true generalizable insight and understanding, AI is not even close to. Nothing short of a human brain is capable of actually understanding. The Einstein example of a counterfactual, where you ask the question of, if I did not do that and I did that, if I sat on a light wave, what would happen? Those are something only the human brain can conjure up with. All machines are constrained. Once the rules are given, they cannot defy the rules. So if you tell them you cannot sit on a light wave, then you can't sit on the light wave. So that understanding is still very far.
It's all the data quality kind of data.
Yeah, we are like a zig and a zag. A mouse is running and the eagle is trying to catch the mouse. The mouse zigs and zags, the eagle zigs and zags. And they both learn from each other zigzags over the years, where to zig and where to zag. But that's not a human brain.
I think we are now done.
Thank you very much.
Time is also over, but I would request at the end Professor Chandrima Saha to say a few words. Please unmute yourself, ma'am.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, Anurag, thank you very much. I mean, this was a very engaging and enlightening, talk. And, the use of AI in future of medicine, it was like science fiction unfolding to me, at least listening to it. And so many things have become real. But what I appreciate is that you pointed out the positives as well as the negatives. But I was wondering, suppose I am in a hospital and rather than, doctors and nurses, I'm surrounded by all these machines. And would I like it? I mean, how good it would be for my psyche. So I was thinking perhaps the COVID-19 has changed this forever. I mean,
Absolutely. In fact, this is a very real question about people in COVID wards in China received everything by robots. Even their medication and food were brought to them by robots. They did not see any human face for the entire weeks they were inside there. And it was quite distressing for people. And when you look at the collection of Chinese apps on Snapchat, there is one for mental health. So they could talk to human beings during their isolation.
okay. So this is all very interesting and really, I appreciate you bringing this to us. And but this is a food for thought that how we will be affected psychologically by all these advances. I mean, we are from the
Absolutely.
old world, I'm from the old world, and the kids now are very good with all kinds of progresses. But still, I mean, we are human beings at the end of the day.
I think at the end of the day, we are human beings. The baby will still crave a mother.
Yes.
Human contact will still be essential.
Yes.
And even if there is a next generation that grows up with more digital contact and immersed in the digital world, we don't know it's good or bad. And even good and bad are very relative words. What's good or bad from our point of view. In fact, that's one of the questions about our commission. We are looking at what this means for the upcoming generation.
Yes. Thank you very much, Anurag.
My pleasure.
INSA-INYAS. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. So at the end, on behalf of INSA-INYAS and on my behalf, I wish to thank Professor Agrawal for sparing his time to deliver this interesting talk. We believe that our viewers might have enjoyed it and learned a lot from today's talk. As rightly mentioned by Sir, COVID-19 has impacted the way health system is working and definitely will have a long-lasting impact, enabling technological innovation in our healthcare system. So for information to our viewers, I would like to inform that Dr. Sandeep Verma, Secretary Sir, will be our next speaker. So we will meet again at same platform on 17th June at 11 a.m. You can also get this discussion and further update on our official YouTube channel. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.